May all beings be happy. May all beings be healthy. May all beings be free from harm. May all beings love life. May all beings awaken. Welcome to another Cuke Audio Podcast. I'm DC Puba of Cuke Audio and Cuke Archives, preserving the legacy of Shunryu Suzuki and those whose paths crossed his, and anything else that comes to mind. I pray that you and yours are safe and comfortable, free from economic distress, able to get out and do whatever it is you want within the limitations of the universal precept of do as little harm as possible. Now, today's, we have a guest today, so to speak. I'm not doing any phone interviews right now because I'm really busy, although I might for next week. We'll see. But I just learned today that Barrie Mason died. And so Barrie will be our guest today. I got an email from Chris Fortin, who has a Zen group in Sonoma County that Barrie has been practicing with. Chris said that Barrie died Wednesday evening, so that would be the 31st of March, 2021. Here I've opened up. I have a page for Barrie on Cuke.com, and I'm just going to read from it first. She said, "I went to Sokoji in either late 68 or early 69 with Steve Weintraub. Then I began sitting at Sokoji sporadically and attending lectures regularly. Later in 1969, after meeting Bill Lane and moving to an apartment on California Street. I moved into Page Street in the summer of 1970 and then to Tassajara in the fall of 1971. Oh, yeah. Oh, that's a Facebook message from Barrie. Right. Oh, it says, go to the bottom of the page for her. All right. All right, here we go. Here's something else. Steve Weintraub took me to a lecture at Sokoji in the winter of 68-69. That was my introduction to Suzuki Roshi. I went to Zazen a few times and met Steve's roommates on Pine Street, Margaret Kress and Tim and Betsy Ford. I was impressed how kind they were to each other. After Zazen in service, students would file past Suzuki Roshi one by one and bow to him. I hadn't been told about this procedure and had no idea what to do. When I walked into the small room and was face to face with Roshi, he gave me a very severe look and gashoed toward me. So I bowed to him and walked past him, thinking, he's not very nice. That's great. Oh, that's terrific. In the spring of 1969, I met Bill Lane and moved into an apartment with him on California Street. We worked nights, the Rincon Annex, sorting mail. This apartment was closer to Sokoji than I had lived before, so I attended more often, mostly to lectures. I went to Trudy Dixon's funeral. At one point in the ceremony, Suzuki Roshi let out an emotional scream. This impressed me as a very genuine thing to do at a funeral. Later in the summer, Bill and I visited Tassajara for a weekend where I heard Roshi give his lecture about putting rocks in the air. Oh, let me comment on that. I think he said he had a scroll or, a sumi painting or whatever. I think he said it was from Kishizawa, his teacher, that was rocks in the air. It was just, a painting of rocks in the air. And that represented a lot of our problems. Our problems, they're just imaginary. So Bill and I were tired of working nights at the post office and sleeping days above noisy California Street, so we accepted a caretaking position at Lower Tubbs Island Bird Sanctuary. After 1 year there, I moved into the building on Page Street, where I began to have more contact with Suzuki Roshi. He lectured usually once or twice a week, sat zazen in the zendo with us, ate meals in the dining room with us, and led sessions. Once I was walking in the upstairs hall with Michael Gilmore and Myron Thomas, who was carrying a 6-pack of beer. That's unusual. Inside the building? Yeah, definitely. Suzuki Roshi came towards us from the other direction. I expected him to say something to them, but he greeted us in a friendly manner. One Sunday morning after breakfast, I was in the flop room with other students reading the Sunday paper. Roshi came in, asked for a cup of coffee, poured in sugar, drank it, and said, "Strong medicine," and then he did a sort of somersault in his robes, got up and left. During this period, Chogyam Rinpoche was in San Francisco. Because I liked his writing, his lectures, and because some of my friends were following him to Boulder, I thought about going. I asked Suzuki Roshi if I should go. He told me he didn't think it was a good place for a young woman. Good call. I am very grateful for his protective advice. A lot of young women went and were very happy they went. But it was Zen Center was fairly free. It was sort of in the middle. It wasn't libertine, but it wasn't puritanical. And it depended on the people. So there were those who were more libertine, and there were those who were more restricted their behavior more. Anyway, Boulder was the scene. It was something. I visited, but I couldn't have stayed. It was too much for me. But I loved Rinpoche, and I loved all my friends there. All right, back to Barrie. In the fall, I went to Tassajara. Katagiri Roshi led the training period because Suzuki Roshi was not well. When it was announced in the Zendo that he had terminal cancer, people sobbed. We came up from Tassajara for the ceremony to see Richard Baker installed as abbot. I was shocked to see how Roshi had turned yellow. We went back to Tassajara. Roshi died during the Rohatsu session. I visited the mortuary to sit with Roshi's body. Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche was there also. The three of us were together in silence in the little room. Now, I have Oh, listen to this. This is really cool. Barrie on the first visit to Green Gulch. This is neat. It says, August 14th, 2012, got the following email from Barrie Mason with the subject line, "You seem to be the ZC historian. Dear Zen Center historian." I don't know if there is such a person, but I imagine that history is being compiled somewhere by someone. Then it says, DC comment on this. I will not read that. That's a link, Barrie Mason writes, "Thank you for putting parts of the 50th anniversary celebration online. I enjoyed listening to Richard Baker's talk. I haven't seen or heard him in over 30 years. I also listened to parts of Reb's talk about his own history at Zen Center. Reb gave a very incomplete description about how Green Gulch was acquired by Zen Center. Maybe no one knows, so I want to include what I know in the Zen Center history. In 1969, Bill Lane and I were living in an apartment on California Street near Sokoji. We were working nights at Rincon Annex Post Office, so weren't able to sit at Sokoji much, but we did attend lectures given by Suzuki Roshi. Working at night was very difficult for us, so when Silas Hoadley approached Bill with an opportunity to live on a bird sanctuary rent-free, we responded. We were interviewed by Huey Johnson, who was then the Nature Conservancy's Western Regional Director. They were acquiring what had been a duck club called Lower Tubbs Island. Well, I don't think the duck club was called Lower Tubbs Island. I think that's what the island was called, which was between the north shore of San Pablo Bay and Highway 37 at the southern tip of Sonoma County. We agreed to take the job even though there would be no pay, only a small stipend to pay the PG&E bill. The caretakers who had worked for the Duck Club had been paid. Huey Johnson really liked Bill Lane and was impressed by what a good job he did for so little money. Bill opened and closed floodgates with the tides. We greeted bird watchers and even cooked meals for special guests. Yes, Huey was very impressed with Bill, and that led to them being there, led to Zen Center's relationship with Huey Johnson and much more. So then Barrie writes, probably in 1970, Huey Johnson told Bill that the owners of a large property in Marin were looking for a nonprofit to buy it. The wife had died and wanted the property left to Synanon, but the husband had learned that Synanon planned to subdivide and sell the property for profit. That's true. Actually, George gave the land to Synanon. George Wheelwright, who owned Green Gulch Farm, and Hope, his wife, had died. They did the Synanon game and really enjoyed it. Even though I don't think they were alcoholics or drug addicts or anything, but I really don't know their past. But George never seemed like that. Never heard about that from him. I just heard he enjoyed Synanon. But what happened is he gave it to them with the stipulation that he's giving it to them to use for a center only, that they can't sell it or subdivide it or anything, and that he didn't want any publicity about him. And then bang, they come out with a 2-page spread with a big picture of him in their newsletter, which was a pretty big newsletter. And it was like a newspaper. And it said, Synanon on the move, big picture of him, picture of Green Gulch. And then he learns they plan to subdivide it and sell it. So I think George Martin, what was, his lawyer's name? I don't know. I can't remember. George Martin was the Beatles guy. But maybe he wasn't named like that. Anyway, he had been suspicious of the deal all along and had made an exit clause. So they took it back. George also tried to give it to the to Mill Valley for some reason, for something. And then there were people criticizing him in a meeting, a city council, and George was offended and said, never mind. So then he asked Huey, who was either head of the Nature Conservancy then or had already started the Trust for Public Land. And Huey went on to become the head of resources for the state of California. That was not the main thing he did, but, that was more high profile than his. The main thing he did was Trust for Public Land. It did a lot of great work preserving land. So anyway, back to this. Probably in 1970, Huey Johnson told Bill that the owners of a large property in Marin were looking for a nonprofit to buy it. The wife had died and wanted the property left to Synanon, but the husband had learned that Synanon planned to subdivide and sell the property for profit. Not the sort of memorial he wanted for his wife. So this man came to Huey Johnson. Bill and I visited the property, which was Green Gulch, and met a man who was living there. I don't know if he was Synanon. He had hair, and Synanon members had shaved heads. No, he was not Synanon. He was just a caretaker. But I do remember that he took us to the barn and told us how he and others were producing a play about Rocky Raccoon. The barn was their theater, and now it's the Zendo. That was in 1970, well before Richard Baker came back from Japan. You might look for Huey Johnson to see how Zen Center was approached. If Bill Lane hadn't impressed Huey Johnson, Huey probably would have gone to another nonprofit group to buy Green Gulch. Yeah, Huey said that. I mean, that's true. I don't know the exact connection there. I will ask Herr Baker. I will pause this and make a note. It's time I call him. After that, I didn't hear about Green Gulch until 1972, probably. I was at Tassajara when it was announced that Zen Center was buying Green Gulch for $300,000. The same price they'd paid for 300 Page Street and Tassajara, and that it would be a place for families to practice. Yeah, $300,000 for Green Gulch was like, when you give a gift and there needs to be a price, and so you charge $1. It's about like that. The Air Force Academy had considered Green Gulch as a spot. I mean, I definitely heard that. And it was probably from George, because I spent a lot of time with George there. Good Lord. The first valley, it's like the whole valley leading up to the first beach on Highway 1 north of San Francisco. Good Lord. Zach Stewart, the architect, who's been with Annie Somerville for many years, although Zach must be 90 now. I don't know how old he is. Or in his late 80s. He's an architect. He was known for doing Gary Snyder's home, and he did the Bellina School. Anyway, he called me up one day, and he was close with Silas Odley. He called me up one day. He said, David, you should write something about how Zen Center got these fantastic pieces of property. I mean, you got 3 pieces of property on federal land that are priceless. Tassajara, well, it's not federal land, it's an inholding, right? But the federal government wants inholdings. They can force you out. You're going to have, and they will gladly trade more expensive land on the coast for your inland property. They like to get rid of inholdings. Right, Tassajara, Green Gulch, Green's Restaurant. You know, that's in the Green Gulch and Green's Restaurant are both in the Golden Gate National Recreation Area. And to have Green Gulch, you know, I won't get into that now, but it was threatened because when the GGNRA started, they were swallowing up inholdings in it. We had to prove ourselves, and boy, did Dick Baker go on the warpath. Huey Johnson did too. Not warpath, went on the phone path, and you know, pulling every string they could. And so did George Wheelwright, and friends, other friends of George, and anyway, that there's a lot to that, but it was saved. And also Page Street in the city. It's not federal, but that's what's her name? The architect. Yeah, Page Street is a Julia Morgan building. Julia Morgan was the architect for the Hearst Mansion, and she was the best-known architect in California. I drove a woman I knew, and this is like, when was this? Around the year 2000. I drove her up to Page Street, and she was an artist. And she just looked at the building and went, oh my gosh, it's a Julia Morgan. She just knew it by looking at it. Anyway, okay. So I've got something else here. Okay, this is from the Winter 1970-71 wind bell. Discussion with students on city practice. Taking up most of that issue. Most, like 95% of that issue. So it had different students saying. So I took out all Barry's comments. Barry, you know, before you see the building, you see the trees. And that's just so nice to be walking along a city street and see all the green, the soft greenness, and then see a nice, very solid red brick building behind it. Living here is much more just like daily living, you know, living in such a way that meditation is just part of your life. Like eating is part of your life, and being around. The priest is part of your life, and being around other people and children growing up here. It's just a whole life. Incidentally, speaking of part of your life, lunch is over for the construction crew here, building a guest room for us. So they're going to be part of what I read now. Living here is much more just like daily living, you know? Oh, God, I just read that. I didn't know it was going to feel so natural and warm, but I knew it was going to be structured, and that if you didn't have a job outside, you would be working here. I wish I didn't have to earn a living and could just stay here all the time. And I was talking before about how people don't make such a frantic effort to be friendly, you know, always greeting you. Well, the priests are really like that. When I served Katagiri Sensei's dinner, he was very cool, just accepted his dinner, very distant and formal somehow. But then when they're being spontaneous, like I was washing the window, I was clear out of the window, hanging on by my knees and scrubbing away, and he ran up and grabbed me around the waist. And that was such a quick, spontaneous, friendly thing to do. And it was so different from when you're serving him his meals in the Zendo. And the priests always seem to reflect you. Like if you run into them in the hall, you really feel that formality. But if you come up very softly and just bow or something and walk past, you feel a lot softer feeling. All right. And here's another place. There's a couple of more times she's in there. Here, she said, you know, different people saying different things, interjecting. After sesshin, you feel the strength that comes out of the Zendo. That's where people put down their roots. while they're sitting. And that kind of strength holds the rest of it. The kitchen is the material heart, and the sitting is the psychic or spiritual strength. This was my first session. I sat between two people who were really hard sitters, and I felt like we were the Three Musketeers, almost like we locked elbows, you know. On one side, the fellow was a Gemini, and I know that Gemini are very irritable, and any little fidgeting you do, they're so susceptible to distraction that they notice it and they don't like it. So I had to be real careful, like I couldn't put my sweater too close to him, and I tried not to wiggle because I didn't want to bother him, and that was really good. I liked having to worry about all that. That's interesting, all the astrology stuff. I wonder if Bill got her into that, because Bill Lane was really into astrology. And after the session, I really appreciate Katagiri Sensei a lot more. I was very surprised at his lectures. They were different from his Sunday morning and Tuesday evening ones. The more you are around someone like him, the more you feel his presence. He had a lot more feeling stuff in his lectures. They were freer, and he said things that I'd never heard anyone say before. I don't know if he said it or not, but I got the feeling that Zen practice is just getting all the way past your conscious level, like when Katagiri stuck the needle in his master's arm. It wasn't that the master felt pain and then thought, oh, pain, oh, I won't show any emotion. It's like long before he had taken care of pain. It's like long before he had taken care of pain. Before he had ever felt that pain, he had gotten below the level of pain and somehow accepted it, pre-accepted it. So that when the pain came, it was already accepted. Does that make sense? Windbell, why would you say you're here? Barrie, I came because I wanted to sit a lot more than I was. And I wanted to be around people, and I wanted to leave where I was. And this seemed like the only place to go. Here I am trying to learn a lifestyle, a way of living that turns life into a constant creative thing. I want to open myself to growth instead of living in a way where I'm always having to protect myself and fight things off and be afraid. I really like the people here. They're trying to be careful about themselves and each other in their lives. There's a feeling of order and preserving, taking good care of things, not being destructive and careless and wasteful. When I first came to Zen Center, it seemed strange. I thought, gee, these people are really horrible. That's great. Here they are, Americans, and they're wearing zoris and eating miso soup and rice with chopsticks. It's so phony, so absolutely phony. But now I don't feel that way. I still think the way some people do it is sort of artificial. But as I did it, I learned to like using chopsticks. And when you're taking your shoes off to go in and out of the Zendo all the time, it makes sense to wear zoris instead of Western shoes. And when you're sitting zazen all the time, it also makes sense to wear floppy pants. So that's everything that's on her page. Oh, I'm glad I got all that. It wasn't easy to get. You know, I got all that. I put that page together in recent years. Yeah, well, recent. I put that 9 years ago. For Cuke.com, that's recent. I want to go to Facebook now. I mean, I posted on Facebook about Barrie. Oh, let's see, what time is it? It's 1 p.m., right? Maybe 9 a.m. Here, having nothing to do with American time. So let's see what has happened since then. Incidentally, the reason I'm making this podcast now while there's work going on is because this is Saturday. The workers get off Friday. So Katrinka comes back. She's staying with a friend. And she'll be here this afternoon. And then this evening, that's for her and me to be together. So normally I would wait till 5 o'clock to do it. But, the room is going to be changed a little. This is where I record. It's also where I sleep and where we'll be sleeping because we don't have a bedroom while this is happening. So I've got to get the recording done here, and then I can work on it downstairs, and Cadet can come up and get the room ready for her. All right, so I'm sure that was very important for you to understand. So I posted on Barrie's page that it said, Barrie, I'll miss you. Santa Rose wrote, my dear longtime friend Barrie Mason died this morning, and we gave her a powerful Buddhist send-off. Rest in peace, Barrie. I miss you already. Liz Wolf Spada, an old Tassajara student that knew Barrie. I am so very sorry. We were friends from Tassajara, and I had reconnected with her a couple of times while visiting Sonoma County. David Silva wrote, Gate parasam, gate bodhisvaha. May the four winds blow you safely home. So I can look in notifications. Here we are. Yeah, and see if there's... So here on the page where I posted, I just posted, very quickly, Barrie Mason died. I had Wednesday evening, that's what I thought. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Farewell, dear friend. And I said a few other things. And I put in a link to the page for her on Cute. And there are a bunch of people put in, emojis, heart, tears, and 7 comments. Beverly Morris Armstrong, who also was a Zen student back then. Oh no, she wasn't answering messages and was posting strangely. I was worried. I feel so sad. Let us know what you find out, David, and thank you. She said, what will happen to her animals? So important to her. Okay, well, that's enough. I know that will build, and there will be more, and maybe more pictures. Very sweet woman. And glad that we stayed in touch through the years. And so in this game of musical chairs, her chair wasn't there this week, but the music goes on, and one by one our chairs will not be there, but there will be new people with new chairs. And depending on what one's cosmic view of things is, some see that we will re-enter the music with other chairs at another time. Doesn't matter. Whatever it is, it is. So, thank you, Barrie. Gate. This has been a Cuke Audio podcast. I'm DC Puba of Cuke Audio and Cuke Archives, coming to you from sleepy Sanur with Dogette Bandita, Feline Cuchita, and dear lovely Katrinka, and we're wishing you and yours and all of us a grand awakening.